Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be hailing from. This is the Fedora Podcast, episode 39. I'm your host, Eric the IT Guy Hendricks, and today we're going to be talking about KDE. For those of you who are unfamiliar, GNOME is sort of the standard when it comes to Fedora. So when you just go get a Fedora ISO and download it and install Fedora, you end up running GNOME as your desktop environment. We'll talk a little bit about some of the differences when I bring on my guest. Noah was supposed to join me, but he had a work emergency and had to duck out last minute. So I'm flying solo today. But my guest is no stranger to the Fedora Podcast, and I'm sure most of you have seen him somewhere because he seems to be everywhere. And of course, I'm talking about the one and only Mr. Neal Gompa. Welcome back.
Hello.
It's only been like 5 episodes and you're back.
Yeah, well, you can't keep me that far away from this show.
This is true. But pleasure to have you on. And as I've seen out on the interwebs, this is a topic you're not very excited about. KDE is just kind of eh.
Yeah, I guess it's just whatever, right?
So for those that are new to the show, haven't met you, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us what you do for Fedora, what you do for fun.
Yeah, sure. So Neal Gompa says so right there on the ticker. I am involved in Fedora in a lot of different places, but the one I guess for this topic's point of view is that I am the chair / lead / whatever. The Fedora KDE Special Interest Group, and I help spearhead the development of Fedora KDE deliverables within the distribution, notably the Fedora KDE Plasma Desktop Edition, or Spin, will be edition at some point. That's coming. And the new, for Fedora 41, Fedora KDE Plasma Mobile Spin. And so we produce those alongside their atomic variants, Fedora Kinoite Desktop and Fedora Kinoite Mobile. So along with this, I do a bunch of other things in the Fedora space around being one of the co-chairs for the Fedora Butterfest SIG that's newly created. I'm also involved in Fedora Workstation, Fedora Server, Fedora Cloud, and a lot of the different language stack special interest groups like Python and Rust and whatever, and doing stuff here and there. Like, you'll find me in enough places that it's kind of hard to have a list. Outside of Fedora, I mostly I'll watch anime or play video games and stuff, and sometimes I'll even stream those games. So that's kind of the thing that I kind of do when I'm not when I want to just sit back and relax a bit. For my day job, I actually am a consultant, principal consultant for my own company, Velocity Limitless, which I do open source consulting around things in Fedora and stuff like that. So hey, there's that too. And so on and so forth. There's a long list. I do stuff in KDE. I do stuff in GNOME. I do stuff in Wayland. There's a long list of things that I do in the realms of open source, and that's just within the Fedora adjacent spaces.
So you're not very involved in open source, is what I'm hearing.
No, not at all. I just kind of sit back and consume all the things and just kind of go, everything's fine.
Well, that's kind of the approach to open source, I think, is it's fine. This is fine. So before we dive in and talk about KDE and Plasma, why don't we define a few terms here? So you mentioned Fedora Edition, you mentioned Fedora Spin. Can you differentiate those two?
Yeah, so within the context of the Fedora project, over the past 10 years, we've had this 3 levels within the project for deliverables. We have the Edition, which is a top-level variant produced by a team in Fedora that has essentially front-page marketing, has the glitz and glam, priority for quality assurance, and all these sorts of other things. But the most important part is that pretty much all these additions are release blocking. That means that during the course of the development of a Fedora release, if a problem is discovered in one of these in one of the variants that are known as additions, and it falls under the required criteria to do so, it has to get fixed before we can push it out the door. Now the second tier is spins. Now KDE is technically, as of right now, a spin, but KDE is a legacy spin that has release blocking status. So for everything except the marketing point of view, it counts as an addition. But you can kind of think of as KDE as somewhere in between a spin and an addition at this point in time. But for the rest of the spins, a spin is essentially the same thing as an addition, where a team has come together to produce a deliverable of some kind. Like in addition to KDE, you'll see things like LXQt, Cinnamon, XFCE, the Miracle spin, and others, right? Like, so you'll see those as spins, which are produced by a team, are not release blocking, but are essentially collected together and delivered to provide a curated experience based on a central software package. Now, the third level is known as a lab, or which is essentially you take one of the spins or additions and you tweak it to fit for a specific purpose. Like, say you want to do something around scientific astronomy, robotics, game development, whatever. Those are fit for purpose stuff, and so those are labs. And so these Fedora laboratories are a team coming together, taking a particular spin or addition and customizing it to be a fit for purpose to demonstrate the utility of Fedora in this particular context. So, like spins, they are not release blocking, but they are often designed to provide you a specific purpose. Like, I think one I like to call out to is Fedora Jam, which is the music and video production, particularly oriented around music production. And it takes Fedora KDE
Right.
and customizes the application selection and some of the defaults to make it more optimized for audio production.
Awesome. And so you mentioned this proposal that's out on the discourse right now about promoting Plasma from a spin to an addition. Where is that? Are we looking at Fedora 42? Where are we at timeline wise?
Well, my hope is that we are going to have it for Fedora Linux 42. It went to council. They looked at it. In principle, they don't seem to have an objection to it, but apparently they want to change some of the base rules around how additions are promoted from the council level, because council gets to decide what are additions and what aren't. And so they want to change some of the base criteria for that before applying that rule set to promote the KDE spin to be the desktop KDE spin to an addition. I got no indication from anyone in any of the discussions that it isn't going to happen. But how they get there is the question of the day. So I expect to have that for Fedora Linux 42. We will see.
That's great to hear. And next to GNOME, Plasma is unquestionably the most popular Linux desktop environment out there. I'm sure there's a few people in chat who will just light me up over that statement, but Neal and I have the microphone, so that's what we say goes.
KDE Plasma is the best. Like, it's unquestionably the best. It's got the most features. It's got the most capabilities. They got the best community out there that works, that wants to help you and makes a technology stack that helps you be successful. And you put it together with what I feel is one of the best Linux distributions out there, Fedora Linux. You put it together and you get a world-class experience. Leading edge technology, all the things work, and you have engagement from both the KDE people as well as the Fedora people, and to make a stellar platform for you to live, work, and play.
And I've got to say, it's not the battleground that a lot of people like to make it out to be. In fact, gosh, probably 10 years ago now, I was at what used to be called Libre Application Summit in Denver, Colorado. And it was sponsored by the Gnome Foundation. It was attended by Gnome developers, but they invited a few folks from KDE as well. And I think the very next year, it was rebranded and relaunched as kind of a joint desktop environment, open source project type conference.
Yeah, Linux Application Summit has been going on, I don't know, for like at least 5-ish years that I've been attending, virtually mostly, but and it's co-hosted by both Gnome and KDE.
But it was great to see the two organizations, the two foundations, the two communities coming together, working together, developing, stealing ideas. Sorry, this is open source, forking ideas from each other.
Yeah.
So why don't we talk a bit about the community first? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. I was going to say that it's not so much about forking or stealing or whatever. There's at some level we have enough common parts that we collaborate on all the important things below our stack. So like Pipewire, Gnome, so Pipewire and Wayland and things like that. You will see people from both KDE and Gnome, as well as people in Fedora and other places, coming down and working in that space. It's usually the layers up where you see things different, like we use Phonon instead of GStreamer. We've got Qt instead of GTK. We've got all these other things up at the top. And then you build opinionated experiences based on that. Like you can see how GNOME has this opinionated experience of having one way to do things in a particular way that you have to operate stuff. And then you have KDE Plasma, which kind of has, while it has an opinionated default, it provides you this customization index, because the idea is you want to own your computing experience and make it part of how you want to work with the computer.
I love that. We'll dive into that here in just a moment. Tell me a little bit about the KDE community. Is there a particular place where folks hang out? Tell me what it's like working as part of KDE.
So the KDE community is fairly large, right? Like it's one of the largest communities out there, with lots of little sections and segments and working groups and teams and all this kind of stuff. I interact with a lot of the KDE community through Matrix and their forums and all these other virtual presences. But every year, the KDE community runs an event called Academy, spelled with a K. And I was just there earlier, just only a month ago. Yeah, was it a month? Yeah, a month ago. I was just there. It was in early September. It was in Würzburg, Germany. Last year, it was in Thessaloniki, Greece. The year before that, it was in Barcelona, Spain. I went to Barcelona and I went to Würzburg. I did not go to Thessaloniki. But that event is where everyone comes together and we get to see all the different stakeholders, all the different people that are engaged with it. Like this year, we had folks from Slimbook. We also had OpenSUSE, the Kubuntu folks. Of course, Fedora was there because I was there along with Jan Grulich and a couple of other folks. And we had obviously people like Blue Systems and Valtypes and all these other people like coming in and collaborating together, having workshops and BOFs and talks and all this other stuff to work towards a way forward for the next year.
Yeah, that's something to keep in mind about anything that KDE touches. They usually change all C's to K's, which makes it really difficult to type things in and find things, but we'll call it quirky.
Look, man, I know that GNOME used to do it with all G's everywhere.
That's fair. Yeah, that's very fair.
And even we don't really do it that much anymore with new stuff in KDE. I mean, people joke about it, but like I can't actually remember the last time we launched an app that like had explicitly like bent a C into a K for branding purposes or whatever.
Right.
It's mostly old stuff that have that.
I'm definitely being very tongue in cheek right now for our audio listeners, but I got to take my shots where I can. But truth be told, I am one of the most basic desktop environment users ever. Other than changing things to dark mode all across the board wherever I can, for the most part, it doesn't matter if I'm using Windows, Mac, or GNOME or KDE, because I've used them all, I am a very basic desktop user. Now, to be fair, my Windows usage is limited to one machine that has a GPU that I play games on like twice a month, because that's what life is. When you're Eric is, you can only squeeze out a few hours a month to play, but I have a dedicated Windows machine, and that's all it does. We could talk about NVIDIA GPUs and drivers and that kind of thing, and why I don't use Steam and Proton and all that good stuff. Although we are going to have an episode about Steam and Proton coming up before the end of the year, so maybe I reinstall. We'll talk about it then.
You'll have to go with Fedora KDE because it's the best gaming. It's the best platform for gaming too. We got them HDRs, we got them VRRs, we have all the stuffs.
And that's kind of what I'm driving towards here, Neal. Why don't you? Like I said, I'm super basic, very easy when it comes to what I expect out of a desktop. In fact, truth be told, probably my workhorse is right here. I mean, to be honest, that is iOS. It's
not entirely wrong. I mean,
and so I mean that's predominantly my workhorse. So GNOME works just fine for me. GNOME, dark mode, and a few extensions like clipboard and I think Gtile. I'd have to go and check my settings, but
sure.
For the most part, very, very simple. For me, logging into GNOME or logging into KDE, logging into Plasma specifically. KDE is the community, Plasma is the desktop environment. Logging into Plasma and trying to get things up and running can be a bit overwhelming. Now, truth be told, like 5 years ago, I've set up Fedora and Plasma and literally wrote myself a 2-page guide on change these settings and you get Plasma working in a way that makes sense to your brain. But if I'm looking for a deeper desktop experience, if I'm looking for something more out of my workstation, why don't you take a moment, Neal, and sell me on why I should switch to Plasma?
All right. Yes, for it.
And now I got to block out the next 3 hours for the explanation.
We don't have to go that long. But so the way I tend to look at KDE Plasma and advocating for it these days is, so KDE uses this phrase, simple by default, powerful when needed. And the idea here is that we do provide an opinionated default that's easy to get used to and get started with. But we also provide you the tools to take that baseline experience and make it more of your own if you want to. Like for me, I've been playing around with I've been mostly basic user for my default setups for most of my things, because when you have half a dozen computers that you have to work with, it's a pain in the butt to keep them all like the way you want them to. But then I started learning Ansible a little bit ago, and I started actually encoding my settings into that. And so now I'm actually going back to customizing things the way I actually want them to work. So for me, for example, I like having a global menu up at the top. I like having things like the clock and the system, the notification tray up at the top instead of at the bottom, because it's easier for me to see, because my monitor, the top part of it is eye level with me, as opposed to the middle. Unfortunately, the monitor stand doesn't raise high enough, and when I try to, it droops downward, and that's not fun. So so I just deal with it. And you can have things like those things that you were talking about where you have extensions for are just built into Plasma. Having a proper clipboard manager where you can see the entries in the clipboard, and you can selectively erase certain things based on phrases and keywords and stuff like that, or synchronize them to that, and things like KDE Connect, right? These are all things that can enhance your quality of life, and they're just part of the experience, and you can just use them. I also have a couple of machines that run GNOME, and I have extensions on them too. The challenge that I have with GNOME and extensions, as opposed to what it's built into Plasma, is that I have to hope that my extensions make it along for the ride. And if they don't, my workflows get broken, and it's not fun.
Mm-hmm.
So for my desktop, like just being able to have that functionality built in, and like when I engage with them and say, hey, there's something kind of missing here, and whatever, can we do something about it? They're generally very receptive to this if you can give them a good description of what you want and what the use case is. Now, sometimes it might be difficult to get to what you want, and that'll take some time. High customizable touchpad gestures. But you know what? Eventually we'll get there. And you have and I think that's the real advantage here, is that not only is it an experience where the baseline is actually good and usable for most people, you have the opportunity to make it your own without really worrying about things like compatibility issues and stuff like that. And if you want to extend it, it's not like Plasma doesn't have the ability to have plugins and extensions just like GNOME Shell does, but you don't see the same level of constant API breakage for extensions and plugins in Plasma that you do with GNOME Shell. And you will see it sometimes, because sometimes it's unavoidable, but you don't see it very often. And so you can rely on those things for longer. But I personally don't need any third-party stuff for my Plasma experience, because it's all built in and I can just turn them off and on as I need. And so my feeling for this is, and this is on top of the fact that Plasma is a very advanced desktop. It was the first to have VR support, VRR support, HDR, all these other things. Like when you look at Plasma Wayland, which is what we ship in Fedora KDE, you have a very powerful computing experience that enables you to do what you want to succeed at whatever task you'd like to have. And if there is a problem or if there's a gap, it's not insurmountable to get a resolution onto that. Working with the KDE community, they're very receptive to these things, and they're willing to help out to figure out solutions for you. And that in itself, having great people that are willing to work with you to support your needs, that outweighs almost everything else, right? Like you can have a technically advanced desktop, but if the people kind of suck to work with, then it doesn't matter. You can't, if something goes wrong, you're just kind of out of luck.
Right.
Whereas when you have good people to work with, then any challenge becomes surmountable. And that's great. And that's really why I drive towards this. And I love Fedora KDE because within the Fedora KDE team, we have cultivated a great culture of being able to work with people and help each other out. And we have people from the KDE community involved in our team as well, who work with us very closely and help support our success, which I'm very grateful for.
So you've talked about advanced users and technical expertise and interacting with the developers, but what about the flip side of that? What if you've got a spouse or a family member, someone who's not technical, that you don't want to go in there and help them customize their desktop to the nth degree? Is Plasma still something you would recommend in that type of scenario?
Well, my mom was able to work with it without me having to do anything, so that's a good. My mom and my dad seem to figure it out. I would say that this is one of the reasons why it kind of makes it's important what your distribution's defaults are for the KDE desktop. A lot of the defaults in Fedora KDE are tweaked to be more intuitive for people to figure out how to use it and to try to have a principle of least surprise. You can't really avoid it all the time because Linux is not Windows and not Mac OS, so it's going to be different. But we can at least try to make people comfortable. And so this is why we have a Windows style layout by default and all this other stuff. Me personally, I would actually like to have a blend between Windows and Mac OS in my setup. And on my personal machines, I've started actually going back to that configuration because now I'm recording them into Ansible so that I can actually redeploy it very easily because I don't want to do it all by hand every time. But that sort of thing makes it a lot easier to understand, how do you handle it as a basic user? And my philosophy around users in general is that there's no such thing as a basic or a power user. There's a spectrum, and it's based on what that person is trying to do that particular day. There are days where even I just don't want to do anything except pop up a browser and go watch some TV on it, from Crunchyroll or Netflix or whatever. Right now I'm watching The Rookie on Hulu. A friend of mine got me into it. I'm like, oh, okay, this is fun. I also like seeing Nathan Fillion in TV shows. He's pretty awesome.
I love Nathan Fillion.
Yeah, he's great. So there are days where I'm like that. And so you could basically class my usage as very basic. I don't do anything. I'm just using the computer. But then there are days where I'm like, okay, I'm working on writing code or doing some tests or doing something with multiple monitors or something like that. And then we're in the moderate category. And then we go into the super advanced. We're like, okay, I'm changing some stuff around. I'm optimizing workflows, changing key bindings, things like that. My opinion is that your operating system should be able to handle the full spectrum. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be operating at every level of the spectrum all the time or even any of the time. But if your desktop computing experience, if your computing experience overall frustrates you when you're at any other point of the spectrum, then that's a deficiency. You should absolutely be able to support people moving up and down. You want people to start out as, like people who start out as basic users often will try to grow and graduate into doing other tasks. They don't actually stay static, contrary to what I know some people like to, project, right? Like there's not really a totally basic user, super advanced power user. There's people who use things differently based on their needs and wants. And
I like that. I like the visualization of the spectrum. That makes a lot of sense.
Right. And so this is how I tend to approach it, and this is why I like KDE Plasma, because it handles that spectrum very well.
Well, and thinking about my own workflows, there are days where it's like I want to go to YouTube. I want to watch something about, I'm running a D&D campaign again, and I want to get other DMs ideas, and so I want all of that out of the way. I don't want any of it touching because I literally just need you as a screen. Then there's other days like today where I need most everything out of the way because I'm doing a podcast recording. And right now I have a notepad, I have Restream, and I have our show notes open. That's all I need. Everything else out of the way. But then there's other days, like what I'm doing for a day job, where I've got multiple different blog posts in multiple different tabs, and I've got VS Code open, and I've got a video over here that I'm trying to watch, and then down here in this corner, I'm trying to write a blog post, and then in the middle, I've got a console, and it's just like I need the operating system to kind of step in here. I need my desktop environment to, well, first off, not crash and lose everything that I'm working on. I mean, that's kind of a big deal.
Very important one right there.
But I like the way of thinking that as a spectrum.
Yeah, like my most advanced use case is when I'm doing streaming. So when I'm streaming, I wind up I use KDE's window management features to have certain windows pop up and stay on top of everything else. And as a result, like I can be very flexible about my window arrangement or whatever, but I can also make sure things like, hey, if I have a chat response window up here, then it'll be there. Or when I'm on like a voice chat in a push to talk configuration, sometimes I have those little pop-up boxes where you click the push button. Well, I can make that stay on top so it can never be hidden by anything. Like, you don't have to go very far to appreciate some of these things. Like if you're a gamer and you're doing things like, oh, you have a gaming chat alongside playing a game, you can always make sure the gaming chat is on top, which is incredibly helpful if the game doesn't have an integrated chat portal, which some don't.
Although half the games I've played, external chat works better than in-game chat. So
right, exactly. And like I know that Discord has become a lot more popular for that sort of thing. So if you get to have like, you have your game up and then you have like a Discord pop-up chat window thingy, you can have the pop-up chat window thingy be on top of the thing the whole time. It can never be hidden, that sort of thing. So it comes in handy to be able to have these kinds of features and built in, because then people can easily slide up and down the level of sophistication that they need from their operating environment. And so this is where I think KDE Plasma really shines, because as you graduate up towards more advanced use cases, or you need more specialized functionality, it's there to support you in those needs. Whereas in a lot of other desktop environments, this is very difficult. You wind up having to either have modifications to the desktop or extensions or patching or third-party applications that do weird things. Like my experience with doing this stuff on Windows was I needed to buy like $40 worth of applications to kind of do even half of the functionality that's built into KDE Plasma, because I originally was streaming on Windows. I didn't stream on Linux originally because my desktop computer has an NVIDIA GPU, and that was where I used to play games and stream on that. Obviously, I would probably do that from the system that I would play games from, and so there you go. But now I do all my gaming on Linux these days, so I can do everything from Linux, and it's great.
I don't know, Neal. I was afraid that this might happen, but I might wait until Fedora 41 lands. But I might have to give Plasma another go.
Why wait?
because now you're bumping up against, do I want to do an upgrade and a replacement, or I guess a replacement and an upgrade? Of course, I could try the beta, but in my brain, it's just like, well, and I'm traveling next week, which is why we're pre-recording this. So don't tempt me to tear down my laptop right before I go out of town.
I'm gonna tempt you. The latest Plasma shipped and all the stable in the Fedora stable releases. So Plasma 6.2 was released last week. It is now available in Fedora 40, as well as in upcoming 41. And of course, the further upcoming 42, which is rawhide right now, but will be a thing in the spring. So you could install 40, which is the current stable release that's out, that was released in the spring. And then you can update from that release within the same release up from 6.0, which is what it GA'd with, to 6.2, which is available now as an update. You could install Fedora 41, which I believe Final Freeze kicked in today. As of the time of this recording, it is October 15th. Final Freeze started. Release candidates will start being made pretty soon. And those release candidates are for the final. You could grab one of those or one of the 41 nightlies and install it, and you'll basically have the same content that'll go out for GA. Modulo some bugs that are going on right now. But yeah, whatever. Or you can wait until GA happens, which is some point between now and the middle of next month. Either end of this month or middle of next month. 41 GA will happen. And you can get Plasma, just install it fresh, and it'll come with 6.2 out of the gate. So take your pick. You could do it. I believe in you.
Well, I appreciate that, Neal. So what are some of the key features for 6.2?
So I think one of the most exciting features is that we have tremendously improved the SDR, the HDR support in Plasma. So let's see if I pull up this. I got to pull this off the top of my head. Is pretty hard, but so like Plasma 6.2 has a bunch of improvements around Wayland stuff. Oh, and the other thing is that if you're an artist, we now include in Plasma 6.2 the ability to configure your if you have a drawing tablet, you can configure that. You can configure that right from within Plasma Wayland. It used to be an X11 only feature. We did a lot of work in KDE Plasma to port that over to Wayland, and so now that is just supported out of the box with Plasma Wayland. So so that's one of the biggest new features. We have, as I said, the HDR. We have color management support using both the experimental Wayland protocol as well as the Frog protocol that is used for games. So we now have HDR support for video games out of the box, as well as if you have a media player that happens to support HDR features like MPV, then you can actually use it and your videos will look good, even if your display itself is normally SDR. So we can do the HDR and SDR thing properly. We have improvements around power management, including having shortcuts for being able to switch power profiles. We've also improved a lot of the accessibility stuff. So we've added things like sticky keys, which allows you to actually, I forgot exactly what sticky keys do, but we have sticky keys. We also have color blindness filters. This is built on top of all of our color management code, where now if you're colorblind, any particular variant of color blindness, we can use our color management code in Plasma to tweak everything to better accommodate that. In addition to that, we have done a little bit of background work to make it so that X-Wayland accessibility screen reading for X-Wayland applications now works reliably across the board, regardless of which context the X-Wayland application is launched in. This is most notable when you're trying to install Fedora, and the installer runs root because it's an installer, and that's what it does. And now you get to hear the harsh tones of eSpeak tell you what the installer is going to do if you're visually impaired. There's also lots of little things around accent colors, system trays, little functionality around screenshots, and things like that. but it's all there's a big pile and there's a small pile. It's just a lot of stuff. And this is combined with also things like KDE Gear, which is the collection of applications like things like KDE Live, Krita. There's a huge list of things. So there's a lot of cool stuff in Plasma 6.2 that you're just going to, and in many cases, Plasma is the first desktop to do this. And so you want the best, the newest, awesomest features. This is where you get it. Fedora KDE.
And that makes a lot of sense because Fedora Linux itself is towards the front of that leading edge when it comes to latest and greatest technologies. To say nothing about like enterprise features that eventually end up in RHEL, but I mean Fedora itself is not far behind the upstream branches in terms of kernel and drivers, and so having a desktop like Plasma that's kind of keeping pace with that makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
You are making this very tempting, I will say.
I mean, I expect you to do it so that way you will have it with you when you go travel next week.
So one other question I can think of is what's in the works? We talked about 6.2, the latest release. What's upcoming?
So there's a bubbling set of improvements coming out for 6.3. I don't know exactly just yet because 6.2 just came out, so like we have to kind of get started on making 6.3. But from a Fedora context, there's some exciting stuff coming down the pipeline. So with 41, we have a spin that provides you the Plasma mobile experience. So Plasma mobile lives alongside Plasma desktop. And so we have a spin that you can throw onto touchscreen devices like 2-in-1s and tablets and so on that you can use. And eventually we'd like to be able to bring this to phones as well. This is being produced for x86 and ARM. Help is welcome. We have a dedicated matrix room for this as well. Feel free to come by and engage with us if you're interested in this sort of thing. So we have now a mobile variant. And of course, alongside it, we have an immutable mobile or an atomic mobile variant. And that's with the Kinoite mobile alongside Kinoite desktop. So all the same stuff except fancy with the RPM OS tree sprinkly magic pixie dust and some Flatpaks as applications on top.
Which is kind of ironic if you think about how mobile phones, for the most part, have been more immutable or atomic, however you want to define non-open source devices. But I mean, because that's how your iPhone, your Androids, all those use an immutable desktop or use an immutable operating system to do their updates. So it's kind of ironic that now we have tools like Kinoite, which is hugely popular among the Fedora community right now. Among some of the others, some of the other immutable desktops, it's great to see some of the atomic distributions making a comeback, and now even on mobile.
Yeah, well, I think the most famous downstream usage of Kinoite is Universal Blue. You've got Basite, which is default to KDE Plasma. I mean, they offer a GNOME variant, but like the default experience is derived from Kinoite. And then you've got Aurora, which is also, again, a derivative of Kinoite. And you've got it's not just these guys. Other people are doing it too. Nobara's got one based on regular Fedora KDE. And I've kind of lost count of all the little people doing stuff around Fedora KDE stuff. And there's also the Fedora Labs and things of that nature. There's always some exciting stuff being built on top of Fedora KDE. And within the Fedora KDE SIG, our philosophy is that we want to help support them be successful with building on top of our stack. We want to encourage people to build labs, remixes, derivatives like Fedora Sahi Remix, which is the most famous Fedora derivative out there right now. Its flagship is with KDE Plasma. That's because KDE is the best. It has all the great tech and with the great community to engage with. So it makes it really, really a phenomenal experience.
That's awesome. So if you've inspired folks and they want to get involved, where can they go? Not just as end users, but as developers, as contributors.
So the easiest place would be to come to our matrix room or our mailing list. So our mailing list is kd@list.fedoraproject.org. Our matrix room is #KDE:fedoraproject.org. those are the places to interact with us on there. And we can get started. Figure out something to get the ball rolling.
Awesome. Well, we will include those links in the show notes. So as we kind of wrap up, Neal, do you have any closing thoughts for us?
I think that Fedora 41 is going to be a very exciting time this cycle. Like we have Fedora KDE is now release blocking on ARM this cycle. So to align us better with Fedora Sahi Remix. So you're going to see in the coming releases, we're going to see some exciting stuff around Fedora KDE on ARM. Here's a teaser. You might have seen that little announcement that went out from the Asahi Linux project about being able to do AAA gaming on Apple Silicon Macs.
Mm-hmm. I saw that.
That's not exclusive to Fedora Asahi Remix. The change has already been approved. It's planned in for the next release. Fedora KDE on ARM will have this feature. So if you're using Fedora KDE on like any useful, powerful, as in like PC class ARM computer, you could do this. You could play games, Windows x86 games on Fedora KDE on ARM. And there's much more coming down. We're only really just getting started. We're building out. We made it to Wayland only with Fedora 40 and Plasma 6. And now the next steps is, how do we refine this? How do we get the paper cuts dealt with? How do we build on what we've done to provide a holistic, more awesome experience for people? And you'll start seeing the first steps of that in the next few releases.
Awesome. So if you're interested, go ahead and get involved with the KDE community, or download it today at fedoraproject.org/spins/KDE. And hopefully here in the next few months, that'll actually be /edition/KDE. Mm-hmm. So we'll keep our eye out on that. Go ahead.
No, it's just crossing fingers.
Oh, your camera fuzzed as you did that. So I was like, are you volunteering a question?
No, I'm good.
You're the guest. The microphone is yours. I'm just here to facilitate.
Yeah, no, I figure it's fine. No, I was just saying crossing fingers that it'll be sooner rather than later.
Maybe put that in emoji so I can read it better.
I look forward to the Fedora release party. I think that's when a lot more exciting stuff will start coming. And I don't know when that is, but it will hopefully be after the Fedora release is out.
Let's hope so. Well, folks, today I was joined by Neal Gompa. He's pretty well ubiquitous, I think, to most open source projects. If there's something that touches a desktop, a server, or the cloud, he's usually involved somehow. He would even come and heckle us when I was hosting Red Hat Enterprise Linux podcasts. So Neal is everywhere. Reach out to him if you have any questions or if you want to get more deeply involved. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast. I'm really excited to say that we actually have plans for episodes through the end of the year, and we're starting to talk to people about Q1 of 2025. So I think we've got a good batch of folks that, I know it's shocking. I've spent the last year and a half trying to get this engine running, but we've got a great group of folks between Noah and Joseph and a growing community over the Fedora Podcast Matrix Room. So if you have ideas for topics or have ideas for guests, or if you are a guest, please reach out to us. Because the thing about podcasting and backlogs is you think you've got a nice, healthy backlog, and then you wake up one day and realize we have a show in 3 days and no topic. This is a problem. So definitely reach out to us on the Fedora Podcast Matrix Room. Share with a friend. The show is growing, and that's not without the help of all of you listeners. Really appreciate you hanging around and listening. Join us back in 2 weeks. We should be live, I think. That may actually be our gaming episode, so that one may be pre-recorded as well. But we'll have this as a live event. Actually, I think we are talking about Proton on Fedora in 2 weeks. That episode will be pre-recorded, but I'll try and be live in the chat room to answer any questions, because our guest next episode is, I think, from the Netherlands, so it was a little late to be recording at our usual time. So definitely subscribe. Check us out on YouTube, Twitch, all the audio podcast players, anywhere you get your podcasts, we are there. And last but certainly not least, Fedora Podcast is now on PeerTube. You can go to peertube.linuxrocks.online. Thank you to Altispeed and the Linux Rocks community for giving us a PeerTube instance, so you can check out this episode. Will be up there shortly. We're kind of working our way through the backlog, but this episode will be on PeerTube and should be on PeerTube moving forward. In fact, I'm looking to see if we can somehow live stream to PeerTube. But today we talked about KDE and the Plasma desktop. Neal Gompa was my guest. And on behalf of the entire Fedora project community, thank you all for joining us. And we look forward to